With our World War II quick study, today, the end of the war in Europe, 1942 to 1945. We're going to begin with talking about the wartime alliances. The Axis powers, Italy, Germany, and Japan, have little coordination between them as they're all really pursuing their own war aims. Joint actions between them are really just limited to Hitler sending assistance to the Italians, and we'll talk more about that today. With regard to the Allies, this grand alliance that was formed by the end of 1941, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and the United States, they've got better coordination with coordinated goals, especially between the British and the Americans. Now, Stalin over time is going to grow frustrated at the seeming delay in opening the Western Front by the British and the Americans. Allied war plans drawn out in early 1942. We'll see Winston Churchill and President Roosevelt decide to take a Europe first strategy, that even though fighting against the Japanese and the Japanese attacked the United States will employ a Europe first strategy. While Russia is fighting in the east, the Americans and the British will begin major operations in North Africa to support British armies in Egypt, to allow supplies to continue to make it through from Asia into Europe. So the North African campaign, this is in the early months of the war. The British in Egypt are successful in fighting against the Italians, but the Germans are going to offer reinforcement and ultimately take over the North African fight. Hitler will send one of his finest generals, Erwin Rommel, to North Africa to lead his Africa Corps against the British. By 1942 in November, the Americans are going to arrive with the beginning of Operation Torch. It's the first time American forces will be in combat in World War II in Europe. Vichy French forces initially will oppose Allied landings in North Africa, but ultimately will end their resistance, which leads Hitler to ending Vichy France, and all of France will be occupied. Now, Erwin Rommel is going to push the British towards Alexandria and towards that all-important Suez Canal. But ultimately, a defensive stand at the Battle of El Alamein will drive Axis forces west across Libya to Tunisia. The final battle in North Africa is in Tunis in May of 1943, and we're going to see Axis powers defeated in North Africa. The results of this early campaign: the Americans are firmly into the war, Vichy France is gone, and now we've got back-to-back setbacks for the Germans as they're getting slowed down in Stalingrad and the Soviet Union and now being defeated in North Africa. Now, Joseph Stalin desperately wants that true Western Front to be opened, but Winston Churchill is reluctant as a failed invasion might not allow for a second opportunity. Italy will be deemed the safer option, what Churchill would call the soft underbelly of Europe. On July 9th, 1943, Sicily will be invaded from North Africa by Allied forces, led by British General Bernard Montgomery and American General George Patton. By the summer, by July 24th, the fascist Grand Council in Italy will give Benito Mussolini a vote of no confidence, and he'll be arrested and removed from power. By September, the Allies are invading the Italian peninsula. Italy will quickly surrender, and now Germany is fighting the war in the Italian peninsula. By 1944, Rome will be taken, and Allies will push further north up the peninsula. Now, while all this is happening, please recognize that there is war going on the oceans and war up above. World War II is truly a war fought on the land, in the air, and the sea. The Battle of the Atlantic is going to be a war-long battle that will rage through this duration of the conflict as German U-boats will target Allied war and merchant ships. Initially incredibly successful. However, once the Allies are able to crack the German naval Enigma code, the battle will tip towards the Allies and more supplies will get into Europe. German cities will also be devastated by Allied strategic bombing. Strategic bombing is the targeting of population centers during the war, much like Germany's London Blitz, in order to hopefully get the enemy to to grow tired and weary of the fight and ultimately surrender. This strategic bombing will be devastating on population centers and for civilians. Here you see Dresden, Germany, and above me, the city of Berlin by the aftermath, by the end of World War II. These cities are just shells of their former selves. Now, the invasion of the Western Front will ultimately come far later than Stalin wanted, with the invasion of Normandy in June of 1944. This is known as D-Day, led by American General Dwight David Eisenhower, and it will feature American, British, and Canadian forces in an amphibious invasion going from the sea onto land, the largest amphibious invasion in military history. The success at D-Day gives the Americans and the British and the Canadians a foothold in Western Europe and leaves Germany fighting a two-front war. This then begins the race to Berlin, as the Soviet Union is pushing Germany from the east and the Allied forces are pushing Germany from the west. Each are trying to get to Berlin and ultimately take the German military's surrender. Germany will use the last of their resources in what is known as the Battle of the Ardennes Forest in December of 1944. This is in Belgium, and the failure to break through leads this to be known as the Battle of the Bulge. The battle did, however, slow down the American advance towards Berlin, which the Soviet Union will ultimately get to first in April of 1945. By May 7th, 1945, German forces in the West will surrender and the war in Europe is over. We'll be back in a couple days to talk about the war in the Pacific and end our quick study of World War II. But remember, if you need a little bit more detail, if you're actually studying 20th century wars for paper 2, head to our World War II playlist where you're going to get much more detail on all of these topics. We'll take care. See you next time.